ability to have a dialogue, a dialogue that may sometimes get contentious. If one executive thinks that we're achieving 80% of our full potential, another executive feels we're achieving 40%. So it's a test of the ability to engage with curiosity and dialogue and to tune into the different various perspectives. It's also a test of the energy of the team and the team's ability to act going forward. And one of the bigger tests is it's a test of an ability to find maybe an alternative type of data, data that the team may not have used in the past. And it's one of the things we've been striving for over the past 10 years is to bring an alternative data set to organizations that builds on some of the great data that already exists. So this big question is a test. It's a mindset test. And I'd ask you to just maybe reflect on that and reflect on, does your team pass the test in terms of its ability to dialogue around this type of question, and a dialogue with energy and engagement and curiosity, something to think about. So what's stopping teams and projects from operating at their full potential? So performance is today, potential is tomorrow, and essentially it's what the team is capable of going forward in the future. And on the visual in front of you, we have a kind of a shaded area which says performance, losses and gains. And what's stopping teams and projects operating at their full potential is this concept of performance, losses and gains. And we've cataloged over 200 sources of performance, losses and gains over the past 10 years. And that's the difference between where the team is at today and where it could be and what it's capable of going forward in the future. And it's interesting to see what types of performance losses and gains are sitting out in the various different environments right now, given COVID. So what we're going to do is, as we progress through this webinar, we'll tune into some of those key areas of performance losses and gains, and we'll share what we call a meta model, which is a metaphor and a model to help you maybe identify some of those sources of performance gains or performance losses. So at this point, I'm going to play a little video. So I'm going to ask you to sit back and relax. Now I'm going to have to stop the screen share for a second and reshare my screen with audio. So just bear with me. Dave, maybe you'll give me the thumbs up if you can make sure you hear it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So sit back, relax, 1 minute and 58 seconds, a little video. So I'm going to ask you to be really curious now, and we're going to share with you what we call our total performance meta model. And the model is a visual representation of the algorithm that we've developed over the years, which measures those 200 plus sources of performance gains and losses. So think of the team that I asked you to rate earlier on in terms of the big question. Who's the leader of that team? So the leader is the driver. That may be you or maybe a colleague. So who's the leader of the team? And the team itself, the people that are required to work on key strategic project, that's the team. What this team is driving. So we talk about teams having to deliver strategic projects, and we ask them to think about those strategic projects as a machine. So what are the strategic projects and initiatives that you need to drive? And that's the machine. And then the track, that's putting those strategic initiatives, projects out onto a track, or it could be putting a growth initiative out onto the track, which is essentially the market that you play in and where you will and won't play. So driver, team, machine, and track. So we're going to reframe that concept of performance using this the metaphor of the PitStop model and this total performance model. So taking a pit stop, identify what's working, increase the chances of winning, fix what's not, and get the machine back out onto the track as quickly as possible. So can your teams do that? Take their strategic initiatives or take themselves off the track as a team, identify what's working very quickly, identify what's not working, and then fix those things that are not working. In our meta model, we talk about a tale of two teams. And when I show you the top of the model in a moment, the top of the model is a top team. It's a high performing team. It's a team where sources of performance gain are in play, and they're very clear on what the gains are. And they design their setup and structure. They highly choreograph the setup and structure. School of thought in Harvard and Stanford, you'd have experts like Wagman and Hackman who will talk about team performance design all the time. So that's the top of the model. And then the bottom of the model we call performance dynamics, which is factors of kind of culture and behaviors. And when you see the bottom of the model, we will show you visually how that team at the bottom of the model is low performing. There's performance losses in play. And the dynamics are slightly off. So the model is a tale of two teams as I take you through the model. So can I ask you to log back into the poll again, and you'll see a visual with some grayed out people on it facing a machine. Can I ask you to go back in? The screen will automatically change if you haven't logged out. If you have logged out, go back into pollev.com/pitstop470 and just type in some words for what you see on the screen. What are the first things that come to mind for what you see there in the grayed out visual with the people facing the machine? Coordinated, thank you very much. Organized, collaborative, teamwork, synergy, organized, fantastic, linked, synergy, organized, clarity, wonderful, energy, teamwork, aligned. It's wonderful to see how people can interact from different parts of the world with this with these tools. Fantastic, cohesion, clarity, collaboration. Brilliant. So that's what you see. So let me reveal what we call performance design. When we say think design, think time, think design, think time. Have you put taking the team that you were thinking about earlier on? Are the right people on the team? Are they in the right roles? Is there absolute clarity around roles, or is there role gap and overlap? Are the team doing the right work? Are they working together in the right way? Have they recontracted their norms since COVID emerged back in March? And when I talk about norms, I talk about task norms, doing the work. What are the norms to do the work? But what are the social norms for us coming together? Have we got the right resources? Are we focused on the right rewards? And are we getting the right results? 7 rights. My daughter says when she looks at this model, Daddy, it looks very simple. Not so simple in the complex environments we work in. So 7 rights. We got the right people in the right roles, doing the right work, working together in the right way, with the right resources, getting the right rewards, focused on the right results. And right results should come first, not last. So I'm going to ask you to, again, take the team or the project you were thinking about earlier on. And I'm going to ask you to jump into the poll in a minute. But think about when you're thinking about the work that your team does, are they clear on the work that needs to be done independently and interdependently? What work needs to be done independently and what work needs to be done interdependently? And has that been discussed, particularly given the current times as people are working at home working in remote offices if they're able to get into them, in different environments. We talk about synergistic interdependence. The top of the model is a visual representation of the synergy that's required to work on work that's interdependent, working together. So back into the poll, and then we'll take a pause. Yeah. And I'd ask you, what aspect of the top of that model is most under pressure in your team or on your project at this time? You go in and you just click and select one of the areas. What aspect of the top of the model, performance design, is most under pressure at this time? So we've got a few in it: right way of working, a couple on right resources, a couple on right roles, right work, right work. Fascinating to see the spread. I think there's one there on right results. Interesting. Dave, you surprised at any of that, or does that sit with you? And
the most common one coming up right now is right way. You know, and I'm not talking about just this webinar, but that's the one I see most often. So not hugely surprised. Not hugely surprised.
So, of course, all of these factors are interconnected. So, you know, you work on one, it'll affect the other. So they're interconnected, for sure. Okay. What I'd ask everyone to be curious about is there 100% clarity on the top 3 results the team or needs to deliver over the next 3 months? Is there absolute 100% clarity on those top 3 results? And if you asked, if there's 7 or 8 people on the team, what are the top 3 results? Would there be any surprises? We've been working with teams across pharmaceutical, financial services, as you say, aviation, Dave, but I've primarily been working across pharmaceuticals and financial services over the past number of months. And one of the challenges has been for teams to look out beyond the current time horizon of 3 months and look out to a 6-month time horizon. And then having conversations around what are the absolute results we need to deliver in time horizon 1 and time horizon 2, and then going on to time horizon 3. So what I'd encourage senior leaders and managers to be doing is to test and measure the 7 rights, but get curious. Right results must come first. And is there absolute alignment around the results the team must deliver? And if you're working on a strategic project or strategic initiative that crosses boundaries within an organization, is there absolute clarity around the results the strategic initiative is supposed to deliver for the various different stakeholders? And what we are finding right now is there are projects that are crossing boundaries within organizations. And when you actually probe and apply the 7 rights, one of the things that's interesting is amber emerges across right results. And what I mean by an amber is when we rate the level of satisfaction, clarity on right results, people are saying that they're giving a confidence level of anywhere from 65 to 74%. So that's put places as an amber. So we'd encourage people to test and measure the 7 rights across their teams and across their strategic initiatives, and maybe be curious around what those right results are and is everybody lined up around them. 1 in 5 managers, this is sourced from our data, sees team interactions as hindering performance. So that kind of links to your point around right way, Dave. Yeah, and this is from a data set that we created over the period July to September this year. And I think I was sharing on another call recently, the average benchmark response to the big question, which is what percentage of the team's potential is being exploited, sat at 64% last December. In July to September this year, poll of 120 managers, the average sat at 64% in terms of the big question, even in COVID times, which says, wonderful, there is potential to be exploited, even in these times. But those similar managers felt that 1 in 5 see team interactions as hindering performance from that data set. So it's just something to think about. I'm going to play a little video, And then we can pause, Dave, maybe for some questions. But this is a video of 2 elite performers in their field, top of their field. And this is an example when people can't agree on right results in the right way, what can go wrong? So let me see if the technology will work. And you may give me the thumbs up on the audio again, Dave.
But he's going to try and dive down. Andy and suddenly have crashed. They've gone into each other. Daniel Ricciardo late braking, couldn't stop in time. Max Verstappen was right in front of him.
I think it shouldn't have happened, of course, but it doesn't matter who to blame. It's just bad for the team. You know, we lost a lot of points today.
Do you feel you moved under braking? Do you think you made one move?
I don't want to talk about it. You know, it's bad for the team, and I think that's already bad enough.
It's a pretty crappy situation. So yeah, I guess myself and Max just need to apologise to them for how it ended. We were battling. I mean, we want to race, and we are thankful that the team let us race. This is the worst scenario, so that's the crappy part of it, that it's come to that. But yeah, we'd obviously battled all race. We touched maybe once or twice already. But yeah, it's just yeah, not nice from a team's point of view, and for us to be.
So 2 drivers, same team, one crashes into each other. So I'd ask anybody who's on the call who's responsible for multiple teams, do any of your teams end up metaphorically crashing into each other from time to time? Or do you have scenarios where you have channels, where you're selling into routes to market that maybe conflict or crash into each other from time to time? Something to consider. But when people can't agree on the right results and right way in one team, that's an example of what can happen. Dave, I'll throw it open to some questions if there's some questions there.
Yeah, I have a few in here. First question is the capacity / potential in the data all subjective to the respondent, that is? Surely there's no limit on the potential, or at least not one that can be measured.
Okay, so that's interesting. So we've asked that question at a subjective level in terms of today, what percentage of the team's full potential is currently being exploited. So yes, that is a subjective. It's a feeling-based answer that we've got off the group today. When we measure performance to potential, and we create out the performance to potential metric as we do a return on collaboration metric, we get teams to measure over 200 variables. Those variables are across team design, which is the setup, team dynamics, which is the culture, the strategic execution, which is the machine, which is the ability for the organization to deliver its projects, and indeed the driver. So we're measuring multidisciplinary factors, and we get each team member to measure those. So that's how. So when team members go in and create out these measurements with us, yes, it's their view, how they see the system right now. So the system being where they operate. So that is a view of reality. That's how people see things. And we can validate some of that against key performance indicators in terms of the performance that the teams are trying to deliver. So it's fascinating. I'll give an example of a conversation I had yesterday with the senior manager, and we talked about the top of the model. And I asked, if the top of the model was improved in terms of the ratings that the team had, what could it do for the business? And the indication was that it could have a demonstrable impact on revenue, anywhere from 5 to 10%. Now, is that fact or feeling? Well, we have to validate that. Yeah, so there has to be validation all the time. And I'm going to pause in one more minute and say, in Formula One, they're using data on the driver, the team, and the machine and the track at all times. Yeah, our view is that teams and organizations need to get to an alternative data set of the driver, the team, the machine, and the track integrated together. Data on its own for just the driver or just the team or just the machine or the track on its own, it is not powerful enough to get to the next level, and that some of the organizations that we're working with need to get to. So I'm hoping that answers the question. And if that person wants more information, quite happily to provide that in terms of our science and validation.
Okay. Another question here. Is there a silver bullet, or based on experience, what do you see as something we could all do now remotely to increase performance?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things is, and I credit Jerry and Ian for getting me to think more and more, and all of us to think more and more about this, is the phrase WIN, what's important now. So I would ask any team to hone in on 3 key things and start here. What are the top 3 priorities that need to be delivered over the next month? And then what are the top 3 results that need to be delivered there? So the connection between priority and results, and is everybody on purpose, and is everybody fired up by that? And we think if you check those 3 things, which sounds like simple things to check in with people on, I think it can have a demonstrable impact in terms of how everybody's working together. But also it's when you're talking about these 3 things, priorities, results, and purpose, and you're listening to each other as a team, that you actually start to tune in to what's really important and what's important now to each individual team member.
Okay.
So,
sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
No, I'll just last one and I'll let you get back to it. And it's one I've heard before, and I think it's worth just hearing your thoughts on it. I might add a thought. Do you think the Formula One motorsport is perhaps not the most inclusive metaphor for team performance?
That's a fascinating question. So in terms of diversity of nations, it's very inclusive. In terms of diversity of gender, it's getting there and it's improving year to year. In fact, it's fascinating. We have one of our colleagues who's an Irish hockey player or a good friend of ours who's a data engineer in the motorsport area, and developing out her career in the whole area of racing. And for anyone who's interested in racing, Formula Females has been launched, which is having a huge success. Yeah. I think the interesting thing in the whole area of motorsport, as well as also the green agenda and how all that's coming into play. I think what I finally say is the metaphor is a way into a conversation. And what we found over the past 10 years is that the metaphor allows people to depersonalize and depoliticize things that are going on in their organization, to identify what's working and what's not. And you don't have to like Formula One to be able to apply the model.
Thanks, John. I'll let you get back to it.
Okay, great. So,
and thanks for the questions too. It's great to see them.
Okay. So I'd like to maybe get you to think about this. Wherever you put the pin on the top of the model, I'd ask you to get curious and say to you, what could that pin be costing you? So we asked you what part of the top of the model is under pressure right now, and some of you picked right role, some of you picked right way, some of you picked right resources. What our data suggests is if there's a pin on any of those, there's a hypothesis that could be costing you 2 to 3 hours per week of time. And when we're looking at our data analytics and we visualize things and using colors and red, amber, greens, and grays and various different color sets, we're able to pinpoint and we've tracked in teams what time is being lost due to lack of clarity around how we should really collaborate and how people really want to collaborate. And I mentioned that metric, return on collaboration. Prior to COVID, what we would have found is that executives could be losing anywhere from 0.8 of a day to 1.2 of a day per week due to ineffective collaboration. We're tracking out, we haven't updated data set on it in the past month, but I can guarantee you over the period March to July, people have been losing time in terms of how they collaborate. So just thinking about those pins, what they could be costing you in terms of time. So remote teaming and projects, what I'd ask you to be really thinking about is over the next 10 days to 20 days, and we can give you out a copy of the model if people would like that, but track how track your team or your project in terms of the 7 rights, and see where you think there's strength, sources of performance gain, or see where you think there might be room for fine tune, and get curious around that. and ask a couple of colleagues to look in at each of the various different areas. And even if you're just saying, okay, I'm going to apply a simple red, amber, green rating to these factors, red being you think it's broken, amber means it's a fine tune, and green means you see it as a source of strength. And just take those 7 and see what it's telling you over a period of time. Many of the teams we're working with are tracking the 7 rights on a daily basis. And why they're tracking those 7 rights on a daily basis is to give them data on what areas they need to focus on at the end of the month to work on the following month.
John, can I just ask you a quick one? It's just come in here on that subject. Is that time lost or time invested, the 2 to 3 hours per week per executive?
Time lost. Okay. Time lost, inefficiency of time. Okay. So if you ask an executive a couple of questions like this, what percentage? So if you've got a stakeholder of a project and you ask the executive what percentage of time they spend on the project, and then what percentage of that time they feel is valuable, and what percentage of time they feel is invaluable, and then you start to look in at the top of the model and you say, okay, well, what's the source of loss of time, or where there could be a time gain? And I think fascinating. Last week we were working with a major pharmaceutical company, and one of the things was they were going back-to-back meetings from 8 a.m. in the morning till after 9 p.m. at night, because they crossed geographical boundaries with very little breaks in between meetings. So that's about right way of working and the ability to collaborate effectively. And then it dips down into, okay, how does that affect energy? How does that affect how I perceive the time, et cetera, et cetera. So I always kind of say to people, look at it at this level. If you feel you could be losing 2 hours a week due to something, or you feel you could be losing an hour a week, well, what if it was only 30 minutes? Or what if it was only 15 minutes? And you got back that 15 minutes to do something else. Step out, take a breath of fresh air, get your energy back. Step out to collect your son or daughter from school. What could those 15 minutes do for you? So it's not all just about work. My view would be the 7 rights can help you just win back some time.
Okay, I'm keeping an eye on your time for you, John. So we've 20 minutes left. Yep.
Okay, so top of the model is performance design. The bottom of the model is performance dynamics. I said to you, the top of the model was around high performing team, all facing a machine. The bottom of the model we would describe as a model that's a demonstration of sources of performance loss or low performance. So you'll see there's 8 various different people on the visual in front of you. And I hope you notice that the visual number over at number 6, everybody is winning. The person is drinking champagne on their own. Tension and cohesion, number 2, is about to hit sense of urgency over the head with a lug nut. You've got a fire extinguisher on number 3. You've got a health and safety kit around trust and respect. What this visual is trying to demonstrate is that each of these people they're co-acting the same space. They're actually in the same space. They're co-acting it, but they're not actually working together to metaphorically change the tires on the vehicle. And this is what we see a lot of right now. Teams under pressure. When teams are under pressure, this is what happens. Sense of urgency can be too high. Trust and respect may be under pressure, or people may be asking, what is everybody doing? Or there may be too much excitement and too little adrenaline. Is the team able to balance tension and cohesion? So is there a balance of tension and cohesion? So can we have a strategic conversation about something that's not working and balance our level of tension and cohesion and be cohesive at the same time? So these are the various different factors, and we call these performance dynamics. We don't call them culture, we call them performance dynamics, and they're behavior elements in the model. So what I'm going to ask you now is, which of the following performance dynamics could represent a source of performance gain for your team? And you'll notice I've changed the question now. I've changed it from a source of pressure in the first question to a source of performance gain for your team in this question. Discipline and persistence, trust and respect, tension and cohesion, communication. Interesting, communication. Give it another few seconds. Tension and cohesion, sense of urgency, communication. I give it another 30 seconds to see.
I dropped a question into the chat there for you, John, if you want to have a look at it. The last one.
A bunch on communication, bunch on discipline and persistence, trust and respect, excitement and adrenaline. It's interesting. What we're seeing right now is that, you know, particularly around strategic projects, is the right balance of levels of excitement and adrenaline. And we wrote a post late September about when the adrenaline is gone and what's happening on projects when the adrenaline is gone. Something to consider. If anybody wants to look that up, we can share that. We can share that. I'll come back to that question, Dave, in a second.
Of course.
So what I'd ask people is two things. How will you as a leader or manager leverage excitement and adrenaline for positive effect over the next 6 months? Because the reality is adrenaline is going to go up and go down in team members. There's going to be various different things going on in home life, within work. I know a lot of my clients are are struggling with the fact that they can't get back into the office, and adrenaline is going up and down, day by day, week to week, up and down. So how are you going to leverage excitement and adrenaline for positive effect? And are you going to have a conversation with your team about how they maintain tension and cohesion when they need to have conversations that require a bit of tension, and how can they have that tension and be cohesive at the same time? So is there enough tension and enough cohesion, or is there too much and too little? So I'd ask you to reflect on that. How are you going to leverage as an executive, and will you bring this topic up, and how you will unpack a topic like this? These are two of the factors that we would see that have huge importance. People say to us right now, oh, we need to improve communication. And what I say to people is all of those factors are interconnected. But if you feel there's a source of performance loss on one of the factors at the bottom of the model, I can guarantee through experience, there's two factors at least at the top of the model that need to be fine-tuned, which is in the area of performance design. So there's an interconnection between the two. Last part of the model that I'm going to go with you go into, and then we'll take some questions. So I'm going to talk through this part of the model in a bit more slowly. So the machine is a test. It's a test of your team's execution of agreed strategic priorities. So what are the strategic priorities that the team must deliver? So think of that team for a second that you rated earlier on in terms of performance potential. And can you grab a pen for yourself and write down the top 3 strategic priorities that team must deliver in 2021? What are the top 3 strategic priorities that team must deliver in 2021? Now, taking one of those priorities, we're now going to reframe that priority in this metaphorical vehicle. So looking at the nose cone of the vehicle, for that strategic priority, is there clarity of purpose? Are we clear on the purpose, results, and priorities for the priority in the first quarter of the year? Are we clear on the product service grip? So what is the value? What is the messaging and positioning of the strategic priority to internal and external stakeholders around? So that links to the customer market fit. So what's the messaging for the strategic priority? What's the positioning? What's the value? What's the appeal? And who is that strategic priority going to serve? Internal customers, external customers, and stakeholders. Who are they, and have they been mapped? Is everybody clear on that? Is this strategic priority in the right gear? Have we high levels of activity and effectiveness? And is the foot on the accelerator for the strategic priority? Have we high levels of effort and activity? So activity and effectiveness. And then in the middle, visibility and control. Have we got the process, systems, structures, and reporting for the strategic priority? How will we know when we need to pull the strategic priority metaphorically into the pit lane and take a pit stop? How will we know that? What are the system structures and reporting around the strategic priority? So this is where essentially what we say where the rubber hits the road. These are the things that the team needs to deliver. And can you rate all of these to very high levels of satisfaction, which we would put into the 80 to 90% zone. We need this machine to be very green, not red or amber, in terms of rating. So again, which aspect of which of the following aspects of strategy execution represent a performance loss for your team right now? And maybe you'd interact with the poll again. This is the final poll. Sorry, this is the second last poll in terms of the model, and then we'll do a quick feel towards the end. We're at 11:47, so we'll do a quick feel. Focus and alignment. Activity at the back. The driver. Interesting. Give it another few seconds to see. So we've got a bunch on the front and a few at the back, and then a couple in the middle. Okay, interesting. There's a concept that we refer to, which is called dynamic alignment. And again, I'll just play this little very quick video clip. Sorry, I've skipped forward one. In Formula One, the driver is out driving the metaphorical vehicle, and what we akin this to is, imagine your strategic priority is being driven around a metaphorical track, and it gets damaged out on the track. So something happens that creates takes the project off track, or takes the strategic project off track. In Formula One, they're able to pull the vehicle into the pit lane and whip off the nose cone of the car and put a new one back on. So we ask anybody who's in charge of teams or strategic priorities, can you whip on and off the metaphorical nose cone of the team or the strategic priority? And what we mean by that is, can you dynamically check the key priorities, the results, and the purpose in a very fast period of time, and ensure that you are fully aligned around priorities, results, and purpose? And are we able to connect that into individual winning also? So dynamic realignment. My belief is that in 2021, as we emerge out the back of COVID towards the end of the year, hopefully, or middle year onwards, with a vaccine, teams will have to have the ability to check and dynamically realign. The idea of long-term 2-3 years purpose, results, priorities, yes, they have to be in play, but they have to be supplemented by a team's ability to dynamic realign and check the nose cone of the strategic project or the team. And Dave, I'll pause now in 1 second and just say to people in terms of remote working, where will you find the next 3, 5, 10% for your projects and teams? And can the top, the middle, or the bottom help you identify of the PitStop meta model, help you identify where those 3, 5, or 10% might be in terms of performance gains and losses? Across the teams that we're working with, they're setting goals of anywhere from 7 to 15% in terms of driving the performance potential in 2021. These are teams that are what we say are operating in the 1 in 20. We believe that there's our data would suggest that 1 in 20 teams are operating at the zone of peak performance on their basis, on their definition, at any one time. So I'll pause it there. And maybe we open up for some questions.
Yeah, let me just put another one for you.
7 or 8 minutes.
In front of you there. So we're seeing one of the listeners, we're seeing a lot of anxiety coming from the driver in firms, which is filtering through into the team, which is leading to a lot of waste of time, waste of energy, and silos. What can we do to prevent this when the driver is the concern? And that's something I've come across myself a couple of times in the last 6 months, more than a couple of times, and quite interested in your view on that.
Yeah. So the model, as you say, is driver, team, machine, and track. So the driver has a huge part to play, I guess. My view is on this is a conversation that may not being had. What's the conversation that isn't being had with the driver? What is the source of anxiety? Who can have that conversation? Does that senior executive have a coach that could potentially broach this type of topic with them? I guess this is one of the key areas that you guys play in below the line, is working with very senior level executives to unpack what the sources of anxiety are. I think it's fascinating that when you use a meta model or use a metaphor in a model with teams, and if there is somebody who has maybe some anxiety, or maybe he's overexcited, or the adrenaline has gone, interestingly, that they will use the model to freely discuss some of that anxiety with trusted sources, I guess, is my view. Who are the trusted sources? I'm working with some senior leadership teams who have anxiety about results, who have anxiety about going beyond their current base of results to the next level of results. And the anxiety is they really want to keep all the people that they have in their organization and their business unit fully employed and happy. So some of that anxiety is a huge weight on their shoulder in terms of trying to protect what they've got.
Let me just add a point to that. In my experience, John, might be helpful for the person who asked the question, is that when I've been using this model, particularly the way when you're doing a data capture with the entire team, what often emerges is the combination of the data set across the team, which is quite an extensive piece of data, that data set challenges the team to have the very conversation that in many ways the data set is pointing to. And the metaphor allows a safe way for the team to sort of navigate its way into having that conversation. So I've seen that happen a few times. So in other words, to your point, what's the conversation we're not having, but if we did have, would give us a big step forward. Very, very often this model itself paves the way for that to happen. So just to say that, and even around the very tricky idea of the driver being the concern. So just to say that. Another point that's been made by one of the viewers is, I think excitement is key in current environment to motivate people. And one thought I have on that, and I'd be interested to hear yours, John, is that a lot of teams at the minute are repurposing. So to that alignment piece, they're actually stopping and saying, do we still exist for the same reason we used to exist? And that can be quite refreshing, because sometimes there's a modification in that, or there's a new language on that, or there's a new emphasis in that. And that can be very energizing, actually, because obviously that idea of purpose in a team correlates with energy and excitement. And so that's sort of a part answer to that. And I think the second thing I'd say is that energy, which is coming up in a lot of these questions, is a huge factor in what's going on in teams right now.
I think it's also interesting, good energy, bad energy, what's the energy? And I guess it's even having a discussion with the team. What is good energy? How is our energy levels? What's this saying to me? So it's not always about, we're jumping out of our seats energy, because there's different types of energy for work that we need to do to reflect. Maybe it's not that high tempo energy. So what's the right level of energy within the team? I think it's something, that's a fascinating conversation for a team to have. So that's on energy. I think the other thing that I'd say is if you have a team of 9 people, you can be pretty sure right now that 3, maybe 4 of those people are feeling a lot of pressure. And again, you know, what's good pressure, what's not good pressure, and just thinking about your team in terms of, you know, who's feeling under huge levels of pressure. So we create out a pressure gauge for teams to, we anonymize it, but just so the teams are able to actually get into this conversation about where are the sources of pressure and who's under most pressure. So, you know, these are ways into conversations that are free from personalities to help, you know, and be very, very clear, you know, in a pit stop to find what's working and to build on what's working. So it's to build on that. I'm really emphasizing that, to build on what's working and then to fix one or two of the things that are not. Also not naive enough to say, you know, one of the things to be very, very, very clear on as well is there's 22 labels on that model, backed up by another 200 factors. You've got to go after one or two of those areas of the model, and try and fix those one at a time, and then it'll have a knock-on effect on other areas. And so what I would say is, what's the winning move, or what's the continuous improvement goal for the team for the month of December? And can you build energy behind that? And that's a really interesting conversation to potentially have.
Conscious of time, John, and yep. So we've a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, so just as it's 11:58, you know, to wrap up with 3 quick fire polls for people. So you see the whole of the model there. You've got the driver, the team, and the machine. So I'd ask you, what part of the model could provide the greatest boost to your team's performance potential? So wherever we start off by asking you a question, what percentage of your team's performance potential is being realized? So we've worked you through now 3 parts of the model. So pick which part of the model, if improved, could have the greatest boost to your team's performance potential over the next, say, 3 months. The poll is alive again. So we've got a few on focus and alignment, a few on driver, a few on communication, a few on right way of working, discipline and persistence, fantastic. I'll give another 10 seconds or so to this. Now, the very last question, and we will close off today with this question. If you improve that part of the model, what impact could it have on the team or the project that the team is trying to deliver as performance potential? So we've got some results coming in there, anywhere from 7 to 10, 10 to 15, 30% plus, 15 to 20. Wow. So by improving those parts of the model, so this is what we do. This is what we try and land with at 11:56. One key thing that, if improved, and you put a quantification on it. So Dave, I'm going to hand over to you and say, this is what I had to say to wrap up at literally 12 o'clock. Can people see or unlock potential? Where can they see it? Relentlessly tackle performance losses with respect to the top of the model. Go after the top of the model. That would be my advice for the first start of 2021. Welcome some tension and cohesion, and check what's important now. And we're bang on 12 o'clock, Dave.
Thanks, John. And thank you for joining us on the webinar. You know, this is a really good example, albeit in, you know, as a collective here on this call, we're not a team per se, but it's a great example of just what you can begin to think about in an hour. My experience of using this is that teams tend to come to this in this new world that we're in, particularly online, in a new and actually surprisingly constructive way. And it's quite an eye-opener that teams can gather around this and start to focus on what's really important now in a very fast and practical way and in a very safe way. So hopefully you found it useful just to put your hands on it a little bit and get a feel for it if you've not already been even a little bit familiar with it. You know, I would suggest that, you know, when you go back to your team, just check in on priorities, results and purpose. If any of this interests you and you're interested in how would this work in your own team, just contact David Duggan, who's also on this call, myself, or any of our colleagues, Ian, Peter, Paul, Miriam, Jerry, any of us, and we'd be more than happy to just talk to you about how that can work in your team, in your project, or across your organization. So thank you again for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.